ahead, Sean Pran.
Off Slipknot.
I hate Slipknot is a phrase that I've been saying for as long as I can remember. It's a well-known thing that I don't like Slipknot. A lot of my friends know this, and it's a running joke between us that Slipknot is just straight up bad. We are so funny, I know. We even make fun of this guy called Luka for just being a fan of Slipknot. In fact, my introduction to the band was through Luka back in my second year of high school. I was still unfamiliar with a lot of music genres besides rap, honestly. On a random ass day, Luka for whatever reason decided to show me a song from this random ass band. Looking back at it, I can't even recall what song it was, but what I can remember is that I hated it. I really didn't like what I was hearing, and I immediately started to make fun of him. I remember I started to call him a Satanist, and that sort of became his nickname in school. Looking back at it, I low-key find it cringe. I know it seems like banter, but I honestly thought Slipknot was satanic and demonic. I didn't think this because of some religious reasons, I just thought that the band sounded and looked disturbing as hell. I was really close-minded at the time, and I didn't really understand artist expression and wasn't open to anything that didn't have trap drums or Kanye West. If you don't know, Slipknot has none of those things. Their vocal style and delivery was also not hitting for young Dado, as the combination of hip-hop delivery and screaming just made the music that much more hard to get jiggy with. From that point onwards, I made sure to let every person know that I hate Slipknot. Every conversation about music that I had with anyone, I had to make sure that I included my deep hatred for the band. I despise them, their fans, their music, and their stupid looking masks. I basically hated them for just existing. But after some time, my music taste grew and I just became more open-minded, so I decided to give Slipknot a proper chance. I decided to put my big boy pants on and listen to their first album titled Slipknot. I very vividly remember my first time listening to their iconic debut album. It was late at night and I was listening to it in my living room and being impressed as to how bad it was. I'm just joking. In reality, I didn't really mind it, but I also wasn't floored by the album. After the album finished, I remember texting a whole review of the album to Luka, and we had a short conversation about the album, and that was really it. After that first listen, I never returned to the album or the band's music in general. I just continued to hate the band and make fun of Luka. For years, I didn't really think about Slipknot and didn't care for them. Until in 2024, I finally decided to give Slipknot a fair chance. For years I have hated the band and its music, but that's because I didn't understand it. I didn't get the lyricism, the sound, and the overall aesthetic of the band. I was so confused as to why people liked Slipknot so much. That's why I decided to interview some members of the community, so enjoy!
Pogledao sam neki video gdje neki retardi reagiraju na Slipknot, ja sam rekao low-key vibe i počeo slušat Slipknot.
I found out about them through a post on Linkin Park subreddit. Yeah, I used to be a redditor.
I was like 6 years old, like 11 years ago. I was on YouTube, and it was this guy I was playing Before I Forget. Ever since then, I became a fan of the band.
Back in like mid-2022, I made a metal playlist. Some of the recommended songs were Slipknot songs, so I tried listening to them. I didn't really like them at first, but I slowly grew to listen to them more and more.
I think that the anti-culture theme they have, I stand for it.
Mostly the image they had and the music, but mostly after that, how they change over time.
Prvo, najbolje izgledaju, drugo, najbolju muziku rade, treće, go te vidi.
The messages behind some of their songs and the feelings of anger, depression, and stuff like that. I love the sound of the music and I love the theme behind most of the songs.
Okay, so my favorite album, that's a hard question. As of right now, I would say that it's the Volume 3. I believe that, for example, songs like Vermilion, my favorite song of them, it's not as heavy, but it's a more melodical. So I would say Volume 3 and favorite song Vermilion.
My favorite Slipknot album is Iowa, and my favorite song off that album is probably Disaster Piece, because it is their heaviest, most beat-down song. It's one of the reasons that I've gotten into heavier music like death metal and slam. Not only is it an album about anger, but it's an album about loss. That album was the album I listened to right after my grandpa died. It's a way to get through that.
Najdraži album je Self-Titled. Zašto? Kako je to pitanje? Jednostavno je toliko dobar, energija na tom albumu je perfektna, liriksi, ok, ajmo ignorirati taj dio. Ima tu puno jako dobrih pjesama, ali sve su odlične, barem većina. Novi Slipknot, shit, ajmo biti realni, ali stari Slipknot, goated.
Okay, here's the thing. I pretty much like all of their albums, but if I had to pick my favorite, it'd be either Iowa or Self-Titled. I think it's Self-Titled because it began with that. My favorite song, it's Gently. I like it because it's got the best atmosphere out of every song they have, in my opinion. And it becomes super heavy at the end, and it has the best scream out of every Slipknot song out there. The first time I heard it, I was blown away. The fandom is just cancer. That's my opinion.
After talking to some lovely people from the Slipknot community, I can kinda see the appeal of the band. It was great to get some insight as to why people love Slipknot and what each of them value in their music. It's fun seeing different opinions on the band's material, and it's also really cool seeing just how passionate the community is about the band. Now it's my turn to listen to the band's discography to see if they were bullshitting me or not. The band's debut self-titled album from 1999 is now looked as one of the genre's most iconic albums. It's a pretty interesting new metal album, as at the time it really pushed a lot of boundaries. The sampling and vinyl scratching on this record was pretty unique for the time of the album's release. Self-titled is a pretty raw listening experience, as you can really hear just how determined the boys were to portray their emotions through the music. The band's vocalist Corey Taylor is a really unique singer that combines a lot of different techniques on this project. He can scream, he can get really melodic, he can get quiet, and he can also rap, I think? I really find his attempts at rap flows on this album so weird, as it sounds uncomfortable a lot of the time. His screaming is also very hit or miss for me, as I'm not a big fan of metal in general, and you know, metal's thing is screaming, but I can get behind his screaming on soundtracks, especially on Eyeless, which is easily my favorite song on the whole project. The drums on that track are insane. Actually, the drums are the biggest highlight on this whole album. Joey Jordison absolutely snapped with the drum grooves on this record, which I'm not surprised, as the guy literally bled while recording the drums for this album. Slipknot is known for things like this, as we will hear later that they really had some interesting methods of recording. I like this album on a technical front, as the instrumentals sound really good for the most part. My main issues with this album are the lyrics and Corey's vocal performances. I already said that I don't really like screaming, and Corey does that a lot. It does hit sometimes, but it also completely misses the mark the other times. The rapping is also tragic for the most part. It sounds awkward and really all over the place. And then we have the lyrical content on this album, which is for a lot of the time unbearable. I get it is supposed to be angsty and angry and edgy, but I just find it cringe for the most part. It honestly sounds like an emo teenager helped with the writing on this thing. Take the chorus of Surfacing as an example and tell me that this doesn't just straight up suck. It's so cringe to me, and I do think that the album truly suffers from the lack of interest in writing. It's too on the nose for my liking, and it just doesn't work for me. I get why people connect to the lyrics, but me personally, I just can't. Slipknot's debut album is just fine in my opinion. I don't hate it, nor do I love it. As of right now, I'm right in between. Slipknot's 2001 record is considered by many to be the band's darkest and heaviest album in their whole discography. It was made in the band's darkest period, as everyone in the band was dealing with some sort of addiction, loss, or mental health issues. The band members also hated each other while making the album, and the whole recording process of this thing was a complete mess. Having said that, Iowa is actually one of the band's strongest records ever in my opinion. Iowa is also considered as a cult classic, not just by Slipknot fans, but metal fans in general. And I mean, the album is literally named after the band's home state, so they couldn't drop the ball with this one. The overall sound of Iowa is a bit cleaner than the band's debut album. While self-titled sounded very grimy and dirty, Iowa takes on a bit of a cleaner aesthetic while not sacrificing the lyrical content. I find the guitars on this album much more interesting and dynamic than I find them on self-titled. I mean, the overall production is pretty solid here. While it isn't as experimental anymore, it is a bit cleaner and polished. Corey Taylor continues the lyrical themes of the previous album, which basically means that he's angry at every possible thing that there is and is screaming a lot. I still find the lyrics kinda cringe, but they are a bit more bearable. The 15-minute track Iowa is a perfect example of this. Corey Taylor literally stripped naked and cut himself with broken glass while recording the vocals for the track. This is very interesting and just wild, honestly, how committed he was to make this project as good and authentic as humanly possible. He was battling with serious alcohol addiction at the time, which I can't imagine helped at all. Iowa is my favorite song on this album, and I think that it's one of the band's most experimental and unique sounding songs ever. It has a really progressive structure, which is really rare for Slipknot songs, and I feel that the concept of the song is really interesting. There is also some other bangers on here like The Shape, My Plague, and People Equal Shit. The highlights on this record are really great, but the misses are just really forgettable to me. A song like I Am Hated is a prime example of this, as it doesn't bring anything interesting to the table and it really is the prime definition of a filler track. Though the band was in the darkest point of their career, as there wasn't a single member that wasn't dealing with something, their album from this era is honestly pretty solid. I still don't think it's anything that special, but it's the band's first album that I can say that I truly like. It's an improvement on their debut and it's interesting to listen to. If you want to learn more about this whole era of the band's history, go look into it. It's really interesting to learn just how many things went wrong in the process of making the album. I didn't even mention the sample in the intro track 515, that shows just how fucked the creation of this thing was. I'm just gonna be honest, this is my favorite Slipknot album. A bit of an unpopular opinion, but I really do think that the band hit their peak with this thing. It's a great mix of their two previous albums and it also hints at what is to come for the band, be that for the better or for worse. On this album, the boys totally revamped their sound with the help of Rick Rubin. I know he didn't do shit, but let's just pretend that he at least helped. This album is a lot poppier and much more acoustic than the band's previous work. I guess Rick Rubin showed them what an acoustic guitar is, and since then they haven't been the same. This album is a very controversial piece of Slipknot's discography as it marks a shift for the band. Some people like it because of this and some, a lot, hate it. Or let's say hate what this album would influence later in their discography. I personally think that Slipknot hit their peak on here, be that vocally, lyrically or instrumentally. This album is not as heavy as Iowa or as gritty and raw as self-titled, and I kind of like that. If Slipknot had continued to go into that really heavy style of music, it would have become stale very quick. I'm happy that they switched it up on here with a more light sound. The intro track Prelude 3.0 is a great opener as it sets up the album really well. I honestly enjoy just how melodic this album gets, as I think that Corey's more traditional singing voice is pretty good and unique. Just listen to songs like Danger, Keep Away, Circle and The Nameless. This album really has some beautiful moments on it, which is rare for Slipknot as they are known for their more harsh sound. Vermilion Part 2 is also a standout as it's a really sick acoustic ballad. The two acoustic songs on this album are honestly one of my favorite Slipknot songs as they really did nail it on their first try making this sort of music. Overall, Volume 3 The Subliminal Verses is my favorite album from the band and it's a pretty good listen in my opinion. It isn't perfect or anything like that because it still has skips on it. I'm looking at you, Pulse of the Maggots. But it is an album that I enjoy listening to and that is what matters in the end. I feel forced making this part of the video. By the sound of the album, I'm sure they felt the same making this shit. All Hope Is Gone just sounds forced. I really do think that this album is hit heavy as those are the only songs that I enjoy on this thing. Every song that has over 100 million streams on Spotify is, I think, good in my opinion, and every other track is, there. Dead Memories and Snuff are easily my two favorites on this album. It's funny how bad the rest of the album is apart from those 4 tracks that I like. All Hope Is Gone is their only album that was fully recorded in Iowa, which is shocking because how did they fuck it up this much? I know I like all the hits from this album and they also happen to be on the more melodic side of things, but the harder cuts on this record are actually cringe to me. Listen to the song Vendetta and tell me with a straight face that it's good. It's impossible. From the very first listen that I had with this album, I immediately thought that it sounded forced. It's like they didn't want to make it good as they sound so tired and uninterested on here. I feel like everyone didn't really try making this thing sound good and just half-assed it. The bangers on here are really good and Snuff is one of their best songs lyrically and it also sounds very beautiful. Oh yeah, and lyrically this album is, I would say, a bit more positive than the rest of the band's discography, but we are talking about Slipknot, so it doesn't really mean much. Fuck this album, review over. I never hear anyone talk about this album. In my professional career of being in the general internet music discussion, I've never ever heard anyone talk about this album in any context. People really act like this album just doesn't exist and I don't get why, because to me this is some of the band's best work ever. This album is a tribute piece for the late member of Slipknot, Paul Gray. Paul was the bassist for Slipknot and also a writer for the band who passed away back in 2010. The name of the album references him and a lot of the lyrics are about him. Also, the GOAT that is Joey Jordison is also not present on here because he was fired from the band the year before due to his illness. I'm not gonna talk about the many scandals and controversies that the band has found themselves into over the years because we are here to talk about the music. Oh, and would you look at that, this album ain't half bad. The Great Chapter is what All Hope Is Gone was trying to be. It has that grandiose sound that All Hope Is Gone was going for, but it just pulls it off way better in my opinion. The earwormy hooks actually stick on this record and I think that the lyrics aren't that cringe for Slipknot standards. Songs like AOV and If Rain Is What You Want show off some cool song progression styles which Slipknot are not very known for having. It's also worth saying just how good Corey Taylor's vocals sound this far into the band's career. His singing voice is pretty much the same on here as it was on the band's debut, for an example. My main criticism with this album is that it's not very memorable. Even the songs that I do enjoy, I can't always remember how they sound, but when I am reminded, I enjoy what I hear. I think people should give this album the light of day, as it is somewhat enjoyable and it's kinda underrated when it comes to Slipknot's discography. From an underrated album to an overrated one. A lot of people consider this album to be the band's return to form. How? This album is actually so bad and I don't get why the community hypes this up so much. I find this album to be way overproduced at some points. It sounds like they wanted to make an album to be played in arenas. I don't like how clean this album sounds and just how mainstream it sounds. I get that you could make the argument for the band's few previous efforts, but even All Hope Is Gone sounds grimier than this. This album also contains some of the band's most experimental production styles and vocals, which in my opinion don't work for the majority of the time. Death Because of Death was such a surprise on my first listen and I was immediately intrigued by the lo-fi, almost ambient/electronic instrumental. I really hoped that the song would evolve into something interesting, but no. Corey starts singing with the most horrendous vocal effect ever created and ruins what is one of the best Slipknot instrumentals ever. While on the topic of bad vocals, this album is full of them. Unsainted, Nor Forte, Liar's Funeral and My Pain are just some of the most cringy and hard to listen songs ever. Especially Nor Forte with its Imagine Dragon-ass sounding mix. Another song that doesn't work for me but it at least makes me laugh every time that I hear it is Spiders. From its hilariously goofy instrumental to its funny vocals and just boring lyrics, this song ends up as one of my all-time favorite band songs. But not all hope is gone. I know, there are some alright songs on here. Orphan is an actually good song and it has a solid vocal performance by Corey, if you don't listen to the lyrics. I'm just gonna say that the last two songs are also fine, nothing too special. This album is way too long anyway, so fuck this. If you want this album to hit, go to a local shopping center. As of me making this video, this is Slipknot's latest full body of work that came out in 2022. Most people consider this to be Slipknot's worst album ever, which is not surprising as it's very different when compared to the rest of their discography due to how experimental it is for Slipknot standards. I personally don't think that this is Slipknot's worst album, but it's also not very far from it. The band experiment quite a bit on this record as they really try to mix in some alternative rock influence here and there, but it ultimately falls flat on its head. The intro song Adderall sounds like the worst Radiohead song ever created. The end tries to do something interesting with the song's build, but it doesn't end up being anything interesting in the end. Finale features another goofiest instrumental that reminds me of Spiders from We Are Not Your Kind. It's not as bad, but it's still goofy, and the background vocals on the track are also way out of place. The song is thinking that it's doing way more than it actually is, so the epic sounding back vocals are just unnecessary in my opinion. H377 is also a huge skip for me as it sounds like a heavier version of Imagine Dragons. The guitars on the song are atrocious. The lyricism on this album is actually not completely terrible, but it's still the usual Slipknot stuff. Not everything is bad, there are some cool tracks here and there, like the Dying song Time to Sing, Hive Mind and a couple else, but for the most part this is another completely forgettable album in the band's discography. This album also came out shortly after Joey Jordison's death, and you can really feel his absence in the band, and that's not the case for just this album. The end so far in a weird way does sound like a send-off album, but I doubt that it will be the band's last full body of work. This was just their final album on Roadrunner Records, so who knows what the future holds for the band. But if this truly ends up being Slipknot's last album, then RIP, cause they really would go out with a pretty forgettable record. But who cares, the melodies on Heirloom slap. After listening to the band's main discography, I can say that I am not very impressed. They have a few solid records under their belt, but also quite a few misses. Their discography is very inconsistent for them to be seen as one of metal's best acts, at least in the mainstream. I really came into this discography deep dive wanting to get it. I really wanted to like Slipknot with all my heart. But that just didn't happen. I guess I'm still not in the club. I want to be considered a maggot, but I don't know if that's happening. I've done my research, I've talked to the fans to try and get some more insight on the band, I've listened to everything that they have to offer, but I still feel like something is missing. I still haven't seen them live. Maybe a concert of theirs would finally convert me into a full-on maggot and I would finally consider myself a fan of Slipknot. So for this next part of the video, I did exactly the opposite. I can't see Slipknot, the fuck, I'm a pesky European, you think that they are coming here? But I did do something similar. A little artist known as Corey Taylor was in town, so I figured I could go and see him live. Enjoy! First off, thank you Luka for securing the tickets for this concert. Around the time of the show it was Luka's birthday, so he copped 3 tickets for him, myself and one other friend. After we got our tickets and the day of the show arrived, we of course went straight to KFC. We couldn't go to the concert with our stomachs empty, the fuck? But the KFC that we took shelter in was low-key based, as that one super popular Radiohead song was playing there. Take a wild guess at which one it was. After that, we took an Uber to the venue, which was super trippy. It was this outdoor looking venue and even Corey mentioned how goofy it looked.
This is by far one of the weirdest places we've ever been. I'm not saying that in a bad way, because I played some weird fucking places. I played a slaughterhouse that was still in business.
But before Corey Taylor took the stage, there was this opener which I don't even know who it was. Apparently it was a Bosnian guy or something, I really don't have a clue, I'm really sorry, I don't know. After his set ended, we waited quite a long time before Corey Taylor took the stage, which is common for shows, but we were still hoping that he would pop out a bit earlier than he actually did. But when he did come out, it was crazy.
Oh my god! The goat! Crazy!
He started the show by spitting on people and with a solo song, and after it ended he yapped for a bit.
I always like to start a really good show by my ass. That's the best fucking part. That's alright. Oh god, I hope it doesn't happen again, goddamn. Make some noise and let me know it's gonna be okay if I don't fucking love that.
Looking back at it, he was talking a lot between songs, but like a lot. It was low-key cringe, but in retrospect, it was kinda cute, I don't know. After a long time, we finally got a Slipknot song in the setlist. He played Before I Forget off of Volume 3. The performance was great, though it was kinda weird hearing a Slipknot song live with only one band member on stage, but it was still a solid-ass performance. Right after Before I Forget, he played a cover of SpongeBob's intro song, which was of course great.
Let him fucking cook.
Who is it?
I wanted to see SpongeBob SquarePants.
Then we rolled into his performance of Snuff, which was amazing. Not only is Snuff one of my favorite Slipknot songs, but seeing it live makes me appreciate it even more. After that, Corey just played his solo material and a few Stone Sour songs which were... Another thing that I still haven't mentioned that was kind of a big deal is that the sound of his vocals low-key kinda sucked. It wasn't that his vocals sounded bad, but you just couldn't really hear Corey very well. The instruments were overpowering him so much that it was hard to make out what he was singing. It was really noticeable, and maybe that was because we were way at the back, but still the vocals sounded very drowned out. After Snuff, we kinda chilled as we weren't really familiar with Corey's work outside of Slipknot.
Alright, so me and Wekser chilling. Yeah. Did you meet us hell? Kinda. But he's enjoying it.
After his set ended, he of course did an encore and said some goofy ass shit.
Yo, the goat left.
What is aging on right now?
Oh. Hey!
You beautiful motherfuckers, make some noise out there, boys! If you make a lot of fucking noise, we will give you 2 more songs. How about that? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3! That's pretty good.
He ended the whole show with Duality, which was also great hearing live. It was also weird hearing the song live with just Corey on stage. After Duality, he thanked everyone, yapped a bit, and the show was over.
Post-koncert review.
Bio je ono, jedna poznata pjesma. Sve ostalo je bilo first listen.
Praktički poslušao jedan album danas.
Tako da ono, party next door vibe.
In all seriousness, the concert was fine. As I said, there were some issues with Corey's vocals, but it wasn't totally unlistenable. Maybe the audio issues were caused by the fact that we were all the way at the back, but oh well, we had fun at the concert and it still feels kinda surreal that I saw one of metal's legends live in person. Whatever my opinion may be on his music, we need to give flowers to these legends and originators of music while they are still here. But now, what is my opinion on Slipknot? After all that I've done, after all these years and jokes about Slipknot, did I go from a hater to a fan? Well, not quite. As I said, their discography is way too inconsistent in my opinion to consider myself a fan. I get their influence and I get just how out of the box their music was for the time, but I just don't quite vibe with it. Maybe that's because I'm just not a huge fan of metal in general, which is on my end, but ultimately I'm kind of indifferent to Slipknot. In my opinion, they are just fine, they have some cool records, but that's about it. So was this whole video a fail? Well, no, I'm very grateful for this whole journey as I really sink my teeth into their discography, eras and everything that there is. I've also met some really cool people through this journey as it really was a long one going on for years at this point. Thank you so much for watching this video, thank you to everyone who helped in the making of it, and who knows, maybe in the future I will consider myself a true maggot. Only time will tell.
Mislim vezak neke zubi pozdini možda još bolje za ambijens kao...
Da, pa ne zato je ostavljamo ove zadnje tri. Ono sam onda kao to.
Da,
jako lijep i...
Bro, ja sam ispred tebe! Ne, bro.
Nisam mogu ja samo...
Ne. Pogledaj. Bro, this is playing Blade. Afterlife.
Nije se to nikada još ponovilo, tako.
Ko si ti?
Miroravno je stari.
We're here. To na Future pjesma. Where it?
How did you find out about...
Zato ne radimo na engleskom. Ajde, daj probaj na
Hello
engleskom.
guys, this is Serta English reveal. By the way, a very good student in English.
Ne bi bilo pametno da je Serta u sredini kadra.
O, teško mu se pomaknut. Kako si ti retardiran?
Osoba koji imaju jako dobar ukus u muziku, očigledno ono, to se valjda zna. I... Kad se nađemo na